Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know some of my questions of our Chair of the Railroad Commission and his earlier hat was on the Public Utility Commission. I can't make the same statement that I voted for him last fall, but I did vote for his mom a few times. but Barry, it's good to see you. And I know as a Railroad Commission you have a different hat on in the Public Utility Commission, and I appreciate all your work on the PUC because at one time, and that you heard my questions earlier, we're proud in Texas to have ERCOT, and we've never had a reliability issue. And I know we've been wrestling it on what we can do to, you don't want to burden ratepayers too much, but you also don't want to have some of the incidents we have. And believe me, I would, in D.C., we protect ERCOT on a bipartisan basis. You talked about expansion of coal plants in Texas, and I know EPA, when they did the carbon rule, it was for future plants, not current plants, on carbon for sequestration for coal. In all honesty, I can't imagine building a coal plant unless you actually did like we did in Texas with lignite right over it. The economics seem like with natural gas, if you have access to natural gas, you wouldn't build a coal plant even if the EPA extended that rule to coal plants. Is that true?
Well, first let me say I'd hope that you would have voted for me because I didn't have a Democrat in my race. So let's remember that we have a lot of mine-mouth coal in Texas, and actually today mine-mouth coal is economic when compared to gas at $3.80 gas prices. Yeah. So we want to make sure we keep those units running, and that was really the thrust of our pushback on Casper. We were afraid that several
congratulations, because that was a part of some of our hearings over the last few years on the transport rule, which never made sense to me. And I grew up there, and the wind comes from the south at certain times of the year, it comes from the north, but I never knew it went to Indiana. But be that as it may.
Me neither. I think the important thing is to maintain the optionality. Remember, in our market, not only do we run a competitive wholesale market, but we also have munis and co-ops like San Antonio and Austin, as well as fully regulated companies on the periphery of the ERCOT market. And for them, having the optionality to build new coal, even if it's Powder River Basin coal, could be an important consideration. So we want to make sure that we don't have such onerous greenhouse gas regulations that building new coal, unless it has CCS, is completely off the table. Gas prices are low now. That's great. We're long gas. It's terrific. I would just remind, though, that gas prices have gone from $1.99 to $3.80 over the last 2 years. I think they'll stabilize somewhere in the $4 to $5.50 range. At that point, it becomes probably a break-even for coal. So again, having that balance, and we have a really nice balance right now, I think is important for consumers.
Okay. I know when you talked about nuclear, and we would have gotten our nuclear loan guarantees in South Texas. We only have the 2 plants, Glen Rose and South Texas, except for financial problems of one of the investors was Tokyo Power, and after Fukushima, Japan wasn't going to send us $125 million, but I know nuclear needs to be part of ours along with our success with natural gas. I'm curious, because you've had both hats on, both from the Railroad Commission and the PUC. Is there a market structure that we can do that under ERCOT, that working both with your example from the Railroad Commission with regulation of oil and gas and PUC, to have that reliability we become accustomed to in Texas?
I'd say several things are important. One, we need an upstream supply, robust supply of all the resources. 2, we need to build midstream infrastructure, pipelines, and transmission lines. And then we need to continue to tinker with the market design to incent new generation. You know, the ERCOT market it's like an airplane ride. You take mid-course corrections along the way till you get to your destination. You don't put it on autopilot. And I'm confident that the current commissioners are doing that.
Well, and I understand. I've been through Eagle Ford and seeing the amount of gas we're flaring. Of course, nothing compared to what they're doing in North Dakota. So that infrastructure is really important, because I know those producers would rather have somebody buying that gas than it would be just flaring it. So the pipeline's important. Mr. Van Wiley, in New England, how many LNG import facilities. I'm well aware of the one in Boston Harbor. That's been a debate in our committee for many years. Are there other LNG facilities in New England?
There are two buoys off the in the ocean off Boston, which are, I don't think they've ever been utilized, maybe once. But the other one that's sort of a dominant resource for the region is in New Brunswick in Canada. So it's owned by Repsol, and they have 10 BCF of storage just across the Maine border.
About a dozen years ago, I kept hearing the Austin to Boston connection with natural gas. Is there not enough pipeline capacity to send some of that Eagle Ford gas instead of flaring it up to Boston?
That's the basic problem. So the pipelines from the west and the south are fully utilized.
And there's not enough new subscriptions because, as my colleagues, people don't build a pipeline unless they have customers. And if you want to expand a pipeline, you need to have those customers committed to that because, it's an investment. And is there not enough potential expansion for those to expand those pipelines where we have the natural gas?
Yeah, so there's a regulatory, what I call a regulatory conundrum here. On the one hand, you have the electric sector in the wholesale markets where generators are thinking short to medium term at best. So year by year, sometimes day to day. The pipelines they will only build the pipe if they get somebody to commit to them for 15, 20 years. So how do you actually make those two business models work together?
Mr. Chairman, one last question. How long is that LNG?
The gentleman's time has expired. And the only reason I point that out is because you do have a chairman emeritus who is waiting patiently to question.
Far be it from me to stand in the way of the...
This member is not complaining.
This member is complaining.
Well, if I could just, you don't have to answer, just how long has that LNG import facility been in Boston Harbor?
Yeah, about 20 years.
You could probably build a pipeline. Thank you.
I thank the gentleman for yielding back.